Today I'm going to talk about one of my favourite films of all time, and in my humble opinion, one of the best films of all time. Maybe surprising to you when you hear what it is, but it's Casablanca, that wonderful film made in 1942 with Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. Fantastic film. You know, it's set just at the beginning of the Second World War in French Morocco, which was a place, of course, where people would go to as part of their attempt to escape the mainland Europe and to get to safety as refugees during the war. And it's then you see this cafe, Rick's Cafe, owned by Humphrey Bogart's character, Rick, which perhaps could be seen as a little bit like a purgatory almost. It's not quite right, but as an analogy. But people are waiting there, and there's a melting pot of people from all over the world, and then shady people who are trying to get exit visas and papers and stuff like that. So that's the main point of the film, and then there's also these characters come in. Victor Laszlo, who is a great hero of the resistance. He's Czechoslovakian. He's escaped from a concentration camp, and he is wanted by the Third Reich. And he arrives in Casablanca with his wife, played by Ingrid Bergman. She's a Norwegian woman in the film. But there's so much I could say about this film, as you can probably tell, but we could be here all day. So I just want to concentrate on the themes that evoke our faith, really. And I chose this film because the main theme of the film is of sacrificial love. There's a lot of self-sacrifice in this film because of the love that a person feels for someone else. And of course, it's not overtly got God in it, but whenever we see that theme of sacrificial love, it should set alarm bells ringing and remind us of Jesus and what he did for us. After all, he showed us what love really is with that great act of sacrificial love. And so whenever anyone else performs that same type of love, they are imitating him. And in the film, you have these three characters, and because of unfortunate circumstances, it ends up being a love triangle. But no one's really at fault. Rick met Ingrid Bergman's character in Paris when she thought her husband Victor had died. So then it turned out that he hadn't, so she had to let Rick go out of love. So that was the first sacrificial love act that we see in the film, is when Elsa, Ingrid Bergman's character, lets Humphrey Bogart go so that he can escape Paris safely. If she told him the truth, he would have stayed and got arrested and possibly executed. So she again puts him before her own selfish needs. But of course, because he doesn't know the full picture, it leads to some bitterness, which is represented by the song As Time Goes By. That acts as a motif of the past love and the bitterness that they may feel. And then, of course, Victor is alive and is very pro-marriage. Elsa wants to respect her vows, and she stands by the man who she fell for all those years ago. And then they end up in Casablanca, as I said, and all these memories start coming again, and you've got the character Sam playing the piano, and he knows the truth behind everything. But then, as we move on, the character Rick, throughout the whole thing, we know he's a good man. We know he's trying to do his best. There are other acts of love he shows, like when he engineers the young couple to win at the roulette table so that they can escape, and the young lady doesn't have to sell herself to the local French policeman in order to get an exit visa. Rick saves her from that. But he wants to give this image of himself, give across this image of a cynical man. He keeps saying, "I don't put my neck out for nobody." That he says that twice in the film. He wants to appear cynical all the time. And perhaps that's a helpful image, so that if he is helping people, it's secret and he doesn't get caught, and he can continue to help people without suspicion of the authorities. But he and this Captain Renault do have a mutual friendship of sorts all the way through, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So Rick's given this image off, and then that means it's surprising to some of the characters at the end when he gives up his chance of happiness, he gives up his chance of escape, and he, at the last minute, reveals that it's Victor and Elsa who are going to be the ones who are going to fly off to America to safety and live as a married couple, and Rick will stay behind at the risk of his own life, maybe staying behind in Casablanca. So that self-sacrifice is shown there as well. And of course, the character Victor Laszlo, in his fighting for freedom, is also a great example of self-sacrificial love. And of course, at the end, that great example that Rick shows also earns a conversion of sorts, because as I mentioned, this Captain Renault, played by Claude Rains, he tries to come across as a Lothario, someone who uses people, uses women especially, and he's neutral, and he tries to play all the sides together. But then at the end, he sees the great example of his friend now, Rick, and that famous line that Rick says, "This could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship." You know that those two are going to do great things, because one can grant exit visas and the other one will keep him on the straight and narrow. So there's that great conversion. Wonderful film, and it just shows us what it means to put the other person's needs before our own. If we truly love people, it's not about what we want, what we need. As Jesus showed us, it's about putting the other person first. And the three main characters in that film, Victor, Elsa and Rick, show us great examples of doing that. So what a wonderful film. I recommend anyone to watch it. It's timeless, beautifully shot, fantastic music, fantastic acting. And that's Casablanca. It's the sacrificial love of Jesus.